my name is Mary Beth Lee, and I'm an Intel analyst at the Vertex project. In this video, we're going to talk through using the Synapse-VirusTotal powerup as a way to query for file submission data. We'll walk through how you can query for that information, how the results will be modeled within the Synapse instance, and how you might use that data to help with your research and analysis. The Synapse-VirusTotal powerup is capable of providing a lot of information about files, IP addresses, domains, and URLs that have been submitted to VirusTotal. In this video, we're specifically going to look at the submission information for files, which we can query for using the command virustotal.file.relationships. Here, I'm using TAC help just so we can see the detailed output or the documentation rather for that command. So this command for any file that's been submitted for VirusTotal, this command will show you any sort of relationship that file has with other files, with domains or IPs that it contacts, URLs, things like that. What we're specifically interested in is using that submissions option here. This will give us information that VirusTotal has about whatever account it was that submitted the file to their platform. When we run this command, it will model the results as init web attachment nodes that will link the file bytes node of the file that we're querying with the init web account of the user that submitted that information. So to give you an example of what a result might look like, we'll go ahead and we'll pivot over to the research tool. We'll take a look at one of the results that we might have. So this is an init web attachment node that would come back from running that command. We can see the time here that lets us know when that file was submitted. We can see the name, so this is the file name that the file had when it was submitted from that user. The account, there's the little account ID of that particular user there. And the location, this is where VirusTotal thinks that the user was based on their IP address, so it might not be where they're physically located. And then the file that they submit. If I actually go and I select this node and I take a look over at the details panel on the side, I can see this rep BT submission web tag here. And this is just letting me know how this user submitted the file to VirusTotal. In this case, they did it through the website. Other things that you might see is through using the VirusTotal API or through even email. So how might I use this information in my own research? To give you an example, we'll take a look at a blog that I was working on in Spotlight. So this is a blog from Trend Micro. They published it in late February 26, 2024, and they had identified what they thought was a phishing email that was sent to, they supposed, to users in Taiwan, and they thought it was likely designed to target people who were interested in Chinese and Taiwanese geopolitics. And they noted that the timing of the LUR, the compile date that was on that file, was shortly before Taiwanese national elections. They also noted that the file didn't seem to be something that was publicly available, leading them to believe that it was a file that had been stolen during a previous compromise and then repurposed as a LUR. So Trend Micro thought that this activity was likely related to phishing activity, where this was a LUR that was designed and timed to target individuals, likely in Taiwan, who are particularly interested in Chinese-Taiwanese geopolitics, and kind of timing this activity around an upcoming national election to try and ensure that the likely recipients would be more likely to open the email if this was a phishing email, or at least open the LUR they identified. So there's a couple different things that we'll want to try and use the submitter information to tease out. So things like who submitted the file and from where, when was it submitted, does it seem to align with the rough timeline that Trend Micro gave us around that national election, and then also how was it submitted. Sometimes that might give us a little bit of a hint whether it might have been a researcher and we shouldn't consider them necessarily to be a target, or if it seems like it wasn't a researcher. So those are some things that we can take a look at. So the first thing that I would want to do is check the date of the elections. And I went ahead and I modeled that as the poll election node. So we can go ahead and lift that. And so the Taiwanese general election for 2024 was on the 13th of January. So we'll be looking at activity that was, or submission activity that was around the state, probably a little bit earlier. And that would be aligned with what Trend Micro believed that activity timeline to be. So as an example, let's take a look at one of the files that they included. So this is a file that they specifically pointed to as the compile time being shortly before that election. So you can see that the compile time here is January 11th, 2024. The election was January 13th. So we can go and see what kind of submitter information VirusTotal has in this file. We'll go ahead and pivot it from here to the init web attachment to see that data. And we'll go ahead and sort time. Now, one of the things that I'm going to be using as a cutoff for the time here is the date that Trend Micro published their blog, which was the 26th of February. It aligns with the same submission date. I'm going to, just for the purposes of efficiency and time, I'm going to go ahead and ignore any submissions that were after the date that on or after the date that blog was published, just because it increases the likelihood that it was people who read the blog and then resubmitted these files or identified things that were related that they're talking about in this blog and submitted them to VirusTotal, as opposed to somebody who may have been an actual recipient of those lures or actually targeted by that activity. It's a little bit harder to weed that information out once the blog has been published, that information is more broadly available. So I'm going to use that as a cutoff. I'm only going to pay attention to things that are submitted before that date. So we'll take a look at that first submission. So this was on the 12th of January. So it was a day after the compile time on that file, a day before the election. You can see the name that was given to this file, the user ID. It looks like the user was based in the US, or at least their IP address is geolocated in the US. And then I can see the file. It looks like they submitted this through the VirusTotal API. One of the things that I might take note of here is that this might suggest to me the possibility that this is a researcher, just because they have access to the VirusTotal API, as opposed to somebody who maybe was just using VirusTotal just to check on this alert or this file that they may have gotten, whether through a phishing email that they were a little suspicious about. Another thing that I could do that was probably a better way to check is I can take a look at the other submissions that this user has submitted to VirusTotal. As I continue to go and run and query for all of those submission details from VirusTotal, I'll gradually build up kind of a history, and in some cases, I'll have additional information about other submitters. So we can pivot to see if we have other information from this particular submitter. And we can go ahead and sort by time. It looks like we have 15 file submissions. Some of them might be the same file that are submitted multiple times. Either way, we have 15 submissions. We can see the dates that they were using, the names as well. It looks like their location is pretty consistently in the US. So at the very least, that tells us that their IP address looks like it's consistently in the US, as opposed to using a service that might bounce them around a little bit. Based on the amount of different submissions that they had, if I wanted to be really careful, I'd probably go and take a look at the actual files themselves and see if it looks like it's files that are publicly reported and associated with different types of threat activity from all over the place. That might tell me that maybe this is more likely to be a researcher, as opposed to someone who is just using VirusTotal to check some files that they might be suspicious about but aren't sure if they're malicious or not, things like that. So looking at what they're actually submitting could give me a way to tease out who they might be. In some cases, people will submit things that are perfectly benign, but then accidentally include potentially revealing information. There's a range to how people tend to use VirusTotal. So we took a look at that one example, and we can also take a look at some of the other files that Trend Micro included. A number of them were archive files, and we can take a look at the different compile time that we have for those archives. So we'll go ahead and run that. We're just pivoting from the media news node representing that blog to the hashes that they released, to the file bytes, and then to those archives, and looking to see the times. So if we sort by time, we can see that two of the archives were created on the 22nd of December. And then it looks like the rest were created on the 11th of January. So all of it shortly before that national election date. You can see the different names as well. And then if we want to specifically see the submission time for just the parent file in those archives, we'll go and just edit our query a little bit here. So looking at the submission times for just the parents or the archived files themselves, we can see that the times range from the 8th of January through the 12th. I can see the different names that are here, and then we can see the different users. So it looks like the first user on 8th was, or at least their IP address suggested that they're based in Korea or in South Korea. We can go and click on that and see that they submitted through the website. The next user submitted twice. It looks like their IP address is based in China. They also submitted through the website both times. Then the third user was based in Taiwan, or their IP address. And it looks like they submitted two different files, actually. One they submitted twice, and all of it was done through the website. So the timing of these, as well as the assumed location and method through which they were submitting through VirusTotal, To me, it suggests that this is in line with what Trend Micro was suggesting, that this was activity that was centered around that national election that was upcoming, that it may have been targeting individuals, maybe specifically in Taiwan or who are interested in Chinese geopolitics. It definitely looks like people are around that area. We can see the lure names that some of these were using as well. If I wanted to be particularly careful, I would go back and do the same thing that we did with that last submitter, where we would go and check to see if we have other submission information for these particular accounts to see if it is a little bit more revealing of who they might be. We can also take a look at some of the files contained within those archives rather than just looking at the archives themselves. So let's go ahead and change our query a little bit. And we'll run our next query. So these are the files that were contained within the archives that we just looked up. What's interesting to me is that when we sort by time, we can see that the first date is dramatically earlier than anything we've seen so far. It's the 25th of December, 2023. The next date is the 8th and the 12th. Here's the cutoff, or here rather, is the cutoff that we're going to be using, which is the 29th of February. So that's 3 days after the blog was released. So anything from here down, I'm not really going to look at. Anything from here up, we'll consider. So going back through these, I would again do the same kind of vetting that we've done before, taking a look at the timing, the location, the submission method. It looks like that first user is, again, Taiwan-based or web submission. Then we have a US-based user through the API that kind of suggests it might be a more regular VirusTotal user if they're using the VirusTotal API, which raises the potential that they might be a researcher, which doesn't mean that they can't be a target, but it's something to keep in mind. Another different Taiwan-based user, that same US user again, then someone in Great Britain, and then we're running into our cutoff here. So what does all this information tell us? So depending on the information that you get back from the files that you're looking at and the submission information that VirusTotal is able to provide, in our case, I feel like we were able to see a lot of information that was supportive of what Trend Micro was assessing, that this activity seemed to be centered around the upcoming election. A lot of the submission dates were shortly before the election or almost right before the election, this January 12th submission dates, that seemed to be targeting people who are interested in Chinese and Taiwanese geopolitics, potentially people based in Taiwan. We've seen a number of submitters who seem to be located in Taiwan. We've also seen other submitters that seem to be based in that general region, in whether it was South Korea or China. However, we've also seen some US submitters, which they may be researchers, they may also be people who are interested in that kind of region's geopolitics. Those would be things that we would dig deeper and maybe even monitor those users to see their continued submissions and see if it gives us a little bit more of an idea of who they are. I typically wouldn't use submission data as my primary information in support of timing or targeting, just because there's a lot that we don't know about those submitters. But depending on the information that we're able to get back, sometimes it can be supporting evidence, or it can let us get a sense about whether or not we trust an assessment that was made, such as Trend Micro's assessment that was in their blogs. What I would probably do if I was working as part of a team, and this was something that I wanted to be able to incorporate into my regular research analysis, is go through with my team and make a set of guidelines or rules about how I would approach this information and try to vet it. So things like, what would I expect to see from somebody who is a researcher? What would I expect to see from somebody who is a recipient or an actual target? And then what would I expect what should I be careful of, being cognizant that a researcher can very much also be a target, especially of certain types of activity? And then what might I expect to see from somebody who is maybe a threat actor themselves, who is submitting files to VirusTotal to check to see whether they're detected, and then they'll submit it again to see if the detections change depending on the changes that they've made to the file on their end, and see if I can build out the expectations of behavior and use them as a way to make my review of the submissions a little tighter, a little bit more careful, so that I'm not necessarily using this data in a way that might be inappropriate for the level of information that's provided.